Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. I'm in the building. Welcome. Oh shoot. Hold on. All right. Nia Marie in the building yet? I'm echoing here. Okay. Hey, Deshaun. Nia Marie. Yes. Okay. You guys hear me okay? Am I coming through? Hey, Ty. What's happening? Hi, Angel. Okay, cool. Yes, 2 mods tonight. We stepping it up. Hey, is it Seaton? Ceylon. Okay. Sorry if I got that wrong, but I know who you are and I appreciate you being here. So I'm here and we're talking about this bond motion that R. Kelly's defense submitted to or filed with the court yesterday. I believe court is tomorrow, the hearing. Hi, Jody. Hello, D. Smith. And we're going to just talk a little about like why he's detained in the first place. And then I'm going to go into what Greenberg, who's the face of this, has come to say of, you know, the reasons why he feels all of a sudden that R. Kelly should be released. So while we're warming up, I'm just going to do my normal intro. Thanks for your patience. If you're on the replay, you can always fast forward. I get the comments that, oh, you took too long to get started. Goodbye. Well, peace out, okay? If you don't know how to tap and fast forward and skip, then that's not my problem. Green booger. Nia. All right, here we go.
Yeah. It's Goddess Dawn in a chariot. Where's she at? There she is. Use your third eye, then look up high. Sun is rising, no more good night. It's time to take flight. Don't be uptight. Like and subscribe. Comment something nice. It's love in this light. High vibration. Here's Goddess Dawn. Get information.
Yes. Hello, world. Welcome, or welcome back. I'm Goddess Dawn. It's Tuesday, October 1st, 2019, and I'm here to talk about R. Kelly's bond motion. I would normally savor this live for the weekend, or at least Thursday, which is my favorite night to go live for some reason. But there's a hearing tomorrow, from what I understand. It's either tomorrow or Thursday. I think it's tomorrow. And this motion that Greenberg and his team have filed with the court to have R. Kelly released on bond will be addressed. The prosecution, at last I checked, haven't filed their response. They have until tomorrow at noon in the Chicago court, or they do it electronically. And actually, Greenberg submitted this to both courts, both New York and Illinois. So in the meantime, I want to go over his 11-page letter. I'm not going to read everything word for word, but that the defense filed yesterday. But before I do that, like I said, I want to go first and discuss why the judges held him in the first place. I think both federal judges have denied bond. So what I'm going to read from first is the prosecution's motion for detention that was filed in both the Northern District of Illinois and the Eastern District of New York back on July 12th, which was the day after he was arrested on the federal indictments. So let's get to that. But before we do that, hey, I'm live, y'all. Hey, I'm live. Let's do this. Yes. Gotta love the kids. Okay, so the prosecution had filed back on July 12th a motion for detention of defendant Robert Sylvester Kelly And their reasons for doing so, or for asking for him to be detained, are as follows. It starts off, the defendant, Robert Sylvester Kelly, currently 52 years old, sexually abused young teen girls, some as young as being in 8th grade, over the span of many years. The defendant threatened, intimidated, physically abused, and used violence, threats of violence, and other controlling behaviors against victims and witnesses so that he could abuse, manipulate, and control them. Defendant's psychological abuse and control of the young girls, who are now adults, is real and ongoing. Further, defendant and his co-conspirators used defendant's fame, power, and financial resources to go to great lengths to obstruct justice, cover up evidence, and tamper with witnesses. For years, defendant used threats, intimidation, and pressure to cause victims, their family members, and witnesses to provide false information to law enforcement regarding defendant's sexual abuse of young teen girls. Defendant and his co-conspirators also threatened violence against witnesses who possessed graphic videos showing defendant sexually abusing a minor girl. Okay, so this is like some real deal heavy stuff. It goes on to say, for the safety of the community, to ensure that the defendant abides by the law, to ensure the defendant's appearance at future court dates, and because there is a presumption in favor of detention, defendant should be detained pending trial. And then they go on to talk about the background, and they want to go back to the beginning. So what they're saying is that on July 11, 2019, a grand jury in the Northern District of Illinois charged defendant in a 13-count indictment involving offenses related to child exploitation and obstruction of justice. Specifically, count 1 through count 4 of the indictment charges the defendant with using a child to engage in sexually explicit conduct for the purpose of creating a visual depiction of that conduct in violation with title this and code that. These counts allege that defendant created 4 videos that depict him sexually abusing a young teen girl. Each of these counts carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. Okay, so we're talking about the District of Illinois charges here. And then it goes on, count 5 charges defendant with an obstruction of justice conspiracy spanning nearly 2 decades from 2000 to the present in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 371. This count alleges that the defendant and his co-conspirators concealed and covered up the existence of videos that show defendant sexually abusing young girls. I lost my place. Okay. The count also alleges that the defendant conspired to pay money to numerous people to ensure that they not cooperate with law enforcement and would conceal and cover up evidence regarding defendant's sexual abuse of minor girls. The indictment alleges that the defendant used physical abuse, violence, threats of violence, blackmail, and other controlling behaviors against victims so the defendant could maintain control over them, prevent them from providing evidence to law enforcement, and persuade them to lie about defendant's sexual abuse of them. Okay. Let me, something's blocking my view. See, I'm trying to figure out how the District of Attorney of New York got involved. Okay, let me just get myself organized. I had a couple pieces of papers fall. All right, so if you're just joining, I'm basically just going through the prosecution's initial motion for the Robert Sylvester Kelly. I think I'm just going to start calling him Sylvester because I'm really over R. Kelly, Rob, Kells. He's Sylvester. Okay, so you know how they say too, Sylvester. Okay, I won't go there, but we'll go on. It says count 6 alleges that for a period of 6 years, defendant and his co-conspirators conspired to receive child pornography. Counts 7 and 8 allege that defendant received 3 specific videos of child pornography. Each of these counts carry a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years in prison. Yes, Mrs. Parker. I was trying not to even take it there. I'm trying to, put on my little professional thing going on right now. But exactly. Lastly, counts 9 through 13 of the indictment charge defendant with enticing 5 minors to engage in sexual activity with him in violation again of Title 18, blah, blah. In total, defendant is facing a statutory mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years imprisonment and a maximum term of imprisonment of 195 years. And separately, so then this is basically summarizing all the shit they have on him, basically. And that, I think it's important to go through this first before we talk about the motion that was filed yesterday by Greenberg and his team, because you can't really look at the weight of what he's doing until you look at the weight of what he's countering. And what he's countering is the prosecution's initial motion, and this motion got him stuck. So it goes on to say, separately, on July 12, 2019, the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York unsealed an indictment charging defendants. See, they're bringing the New York indictment into this thing. This was filed originally for Illinois, and now we're bringing in New York. It says that they unsealed an indictment charging defendant in 5-count indictment. That indictment includes a racketeering charge with multiple predicate racketeering acts relating to 5 victims, some of whom were minors at the time of the conduct. And it says here, there is no overlap between the victims alleged in this indictment and the victims alleged in the New York case. So they're saying all of these things are separate. There's no overlap here. Accordingly, defendant faces several federal charges related to the abuse of 10 different minors and young women. Okay, in addition to those significant federal charges, defendant also faces serious charges in the Circuit Court of Cook County, Illinois. So now they're bringing in the state charges. Specifically, defendant was charged in February 2019 with 10 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse of 4 different victims, including 3 victims who were under age of 17 at the time of the abuse. Then in May 2019, what's up, Marcus? Then in May of 2019, defendant was charged with 11 additional counts of sexual assault and abuse relating to one of those minor victims. 4 of those charges are pursuant to, and then it goes on to talk about the titles and the sections. I'm not pretending to be an attorney. I'm not trying to be an attorney or a judge. All I'm doing is reading the receipts, okay? A lot of people don't like these receipts. They come in the comments to talk shit about the receipts, but guess what? It's not my fault. I'm just reading what's happening, okay? So let's see. It says here, those are charges. Okay, those charges allege that defendant committed aggravated criminal sexual assault, including by threatening the life of a victim or during the commission of another felony. Okay, so then it goes on to talk about the legal standard, and what this section does is it talks about precedents. It brings in prior cases and compares them to this one, and basically says, in this case, this was what was going on. The burden of proof was this, and this was the evidence, and this person was held, and this person. So it's bringing in some bricks. And I'm not going to read through this. It just says that, let's see, because it's involving a crime of violence, there's a risk that the defendant will obstruct or attempt to obstruct justice, attempt to threaten, injure, or intimidate a prospective witness or juror, felony child exploitation offenses under chapters 110 and 117, such as the crimes alleged in counts 1 through 4 and counts 6 through 13 of the indictment, qualify as crimes of violence under the Bail Reform Act. So they're basically saying crimes of violence is one of the proponents for someone to be able to get detained, and he qualifies because of the charges. So it goes on to talk about the Bail Reform Act and how it establishes a set of factors that the court may consider in its detention determination. And that includes the nature and the circumstances of the offense charged, the weight of the evidence against the defendant, and the history and characteristics of the defendant. So his history, his characteristics, which is that past case, all the stuff in between, as well as the nature of the circumstances of these current charges, the weight of the evidence, all those things come into play when the judge decides whether or not to detain the person. Okay? So it goes on to say that it talks about presumption. It says there is presumption that no condition nor combination of conditions will reasonably assure the appearance of the defendant and the safety of the community if there's a probable cause to believe that a defendant committed offense involving a minor victim under 18. That presumption applies in this case because the indictment charges defendant with those statutes in counts 1 through 4 and counts 9 through 13. This presumption continues to weigh in the balance against bail, even after the defendant meets his burden of producing some evidence to rebut the presumption. So even with evidence trying to rebut the presumption, it says that the presumption continues to weigh in the balance. So it's going to be really hard for them to, I think, convince the judge. And I think this is the female judge. Nia, are you there? Mia, is this the female judge that is in New York? Okay, so there's a female judge. I think it's the New York federal judge. She has quite a bit of history. I think Obama helped to elect her, and she has a history of working with women's abused women and things like that. So I think that's an edge also. So let's see, what else do we have here? It talks about the federal rules of evidence and how they don't apply at a detention hearing, and the government may proffer evidence. Okay. Now is the next section is talking about the argument, the actual argument for why he needs to stay in jail. And what this says is, during the course of its investigation, the government interviewed numerous witnesses, received 3 videos that depict the defendant sexually abusing a young teen girl, and obtained numerous records regarding defendant's efforts to tamper with witnesses, falsify records, and conceal and cover up evidence. This evidence establishes that defendant spent many years of his adult life exploiting and manipulating young girls, including by threatening members of a victim's family. In order to avoid detection by law enforcement and to attempt to conceal the full scope of his serial exploitive efforts, defendant paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to witnesses to collect videos of his sexual abuse of minors, and he used pressure, intimidation, threats, and other coercive measures to persuade victims and witnesses to lie to investigators. Okay, so they're calling him out on all the stuff he was doing back in between 2002 and 2008 to keep people from testifying, and which he essentially did at the end of the day. But that person is cooperating now. So, okay, so the defendant should be detained pending trial. He poses a significant threat to minor girls in the community, to victims and witnesses in the case, and to the ongoing investigation. They're still investigating, okay? They're still working on more stuff. In some of the documents that I actually reviewed, it sounds like there's still pending indictments and pending co-defendants, but I guess time will tell. It says, in addition, defendant has the means and the incentive to flee the jurisdiction, given that he is facing multiple federal charges that carry a mandatory minimum of 10 years imprisonment and a maximum of 195 years imprisonment. Defendant cannot overcome the statutory presumption in favor of detention in this case. All right. And then it goes on and it talks about how he poses a risk of danger to the community, the nature and the circumstances of the offenses, and that is part of what weighs in on this decision. And it basically says the defendant is charged with incredibly serious crimes involving the sexual exploitation and abuse of young teenage girls. 5 of those victims, minors 1 through 5, are included in the indictment. That said, the government's ongoing investigation has revealed that defendants sexually abused many other young girls. Indeed, as one example, in 1994, when the defendant was 27 years old, he married a 15-year-old girl at the Hotel Rosemont, Illinois, knowing that she was a minor. And I think we know who that is. Okay. Move. My cat is trying to jump up here. Beat it. Okay. I think we know who we're referring to here. It says defendant's sexual abuse of young girls was prolific, not only in the number of girls he abused, but also in the frequency of his sexual abuse of particular girls. Two of the minors listed in the indictment reported that defendant sexually abused them hundreds of times as minors, beginning when they were in middle school. Okay? I can't believe I'm even reading this. This sounds like a really bad horror flick. Like, this sounds crazy. Okay, so it goes on to say defendant's sexual abuse of young girls included degrading, humiliating, and sadomasochistic conduct, such as urinating on a minor girl's body. The Seventh Circuit has held that urinating on a minor victim qualifies for the sentencing enhancement for sadistic or masochistic conduct. And it goes on to say which section of the United States circuit that it belongs to and all this stuff. Let's see. Let's move on. 4 of the 5 minor victims listed in the indictment reported that defendant pressured and coerced them into having threesomes with defendant and other minor girls. 2 of those minor girls reported that they cried during the threesomes and that defendant nevertheless pressured and coerced them to continue. I feel sick. One victim reported that defendant told her not to be a baby, in quotes, about it and stop crying. In addition to sexually abusing young teen girls, defendant further exploited them by frequently filming his sexual abuse of them. The indictment refers to videos 1, 2, 3, and 4, all of which depict the defendant's sexual abuse of minor 1. The government possesses copies of video 1, 2, and 3, which were filmed in different rooms at defendant's former residence located at 1010 West George Street in Chicago. The government does not possess a copy of video 4, which also depicts minor 2 in addition to minor 1, but at least 4 witnesses provided evidence to the government regarding its existence, in addition to documentary evidence corroborating those witnesses. The government does not have video 4 as a result of defendant's obstruction of justice, which is charged in count 5 of the indictment and discussed further below. All right. So they don't have video 4, and because they don't have video 4, he's also being blamed for that, for his coercion, his obstruction. It goes on to say minor 1 wasn't the only girl that defendant video recorded. 4 of the 5 minor victims listed in the indictment reported that defendant video recorded his sexual abuse of them. Moreover, there is no doubt that defendant knew the girls were under the age of 18. Multiple victims reported that defendant frequently demanded that they say their age to him during defendant's sexual abuse of them. That's corroborated by video 2 and video 3, in which both defendant and minor 1 refer to minor 1 and minor 1's body parts as being 14 years old. In total, on videos 2 and 3, defendant and minor repeat her age at least 15 times. He is a sick fuck. Can I answer my question about why Azriel is the only one that can... I can't even... Reading this and then thinking about Azriel, Joycelyn, and, just even the girl in the first tape, like, it just breaks my heart to know that, these girls were subjected to this behavior. Yes, they, some will say, they wanted to be around him. Take a break. Okay. They wanted to be around him, but I mean, these are children. Like, these kids are not totally formed. They're not grown. They're not matured. They haven't finished cooking yet. You know what I mean? Like, um, yeah, they don't care. The Beehive does not care. That actually reminds me. Wait, where's my other phone? There's a YouTuber. I can't believe some of the stuff she says about these girls. And she believes that even 16-year-old, 16 and up, I think is what she said, should be held responsible for that whatever happened to them if they wanted to deal with a grown person. And she feels like that age is like it doesn't matter. She said it doesn't matter. A matter of fact, let me just see if I can pull up a clip of that, because I couldn't believe that. It's not Neek. It's not Neek, Deshaun. Let me see if I can find it. Let me take a sip of water real quick, because that was a lot of reading. It's a lot, but if you were listening, you see that this is not nothing to be joking about, you know. And imagine being on the other end of this as a young girl, as a child. And then especially when your parents actually are in on it. And I'm not gonna, go there right now, but the parents definitely, should have had a bigger role in their daughters and sons, because I believe also that there are boys involved in this too. Hi, Donna. Nia, I don't remember which video it was that she said that stuff. Okay, let me see. Oh, okay, it was the one she was. Okay, so she was ranting about Tasha K.
What's going on, everybody?
Let me see if I can just. I ain't trying to give her too much play on my channel, but this stuff right here, you can't. I just can't believe some of the stuff. Okay, let's see.
We don't support what she subscribes to. We support R. Kelly. We believe him.
Okay, I think she's talking about Tasha K, because this is a rant about the Tasha K video about the sisters. And I guess Tasha K called out the Beehive or the fans, saying that they're equally complicit and they should also go to jail. And so this got them hot and bothered, and here's what she had to say.
I don't give a fuck about no fucking 16-year-old, to be honest with you, that chase a grown man down. You put yourself in a grown person's business, you're going to get dealt with. Put yourself in places that's not dangerous. Don't put yourself in harm's way.
So basically, she's calling R. Kelly dangerous. Don't put yourself in danger. So she's basically admitting that she agrees. Are you going to call her out? I'm going to call you C. I don't want to mispronounce your name. But yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, that's crazy to me. Sick, Ty, exactly. Like, I can't even believe the stuff that comes out of these people's mouths. And then there was another part. Let me see if I can remember the little time. I try to keep the times so I don't have to listen to the whole thing again. Let's see.
Lying ass alleged victims. They're not victims. And I don't give a fuck. I don't give a damn who don't like it. I don't call it a rape. It's not rape in my book. I don't give a fuck about statutory. In my book, a bitch that is grown enough to pursue a grown enough to exploit and lie, that is not a victim to me, and I don't care. If you want to learn, go ahead and put yourself in that position. Put yourself in that position. I'll give her accountability as well as I give the next person accountability.
Okay. So there you have it. This is the mentality these people are on. I mean, wow. Like, wow. I can't. So this is part of why I'm so passionate about my this is a cause for me. This is a cause for me. You know, I've never been you know, molested or raped, like, you know, as a child, from especially a family, you know, none of that for me. However, I have empathy. I've been in situations that weren't pleasant. I understand fear. As a woman, you know, a lot of times we're repressed, you know, due to our femininity, obviously. And, you know, sometimes this situation happens, and next thing you know, it's like fight or flight. So, you called it the P. Yes, you know I had to call. You know I had to call her out now. So, all that to say that that breaks my heart to hear a woman, a black woman, talk about kids this way. Because 16 to me is a kid. I remember when I was 16. And I guess if I had to really like grow up and deal with life, if I had to do it on my own or something like that, I've always been pretty resourceful and pretty smart, and I probably would have figured it out. But when you trust somebody who is an adult, and especially at that age, your hormones are all over the place, and you substitute, um, you know, that these people can manipulate a young mind, and you think it's love, and you know, it's like you can't blame a child for being in a position with an adult. It is the adult's responsibility to walk away from the situation, to school the child if necessary or whatever, but to, you know, not take advantage. And not even just take advantage, because yes, there are situations where men will date younger women or young women, and there's no abuse. They date them, they might marry them, they may even have family. And I know that was the way back when young girls were like, you know, arranged. I was going to say sold, but there were arranged marriages. There, you know, younger girl, older man is not a new idea, but we're talking abuse. You heard the things that I read. If you didn't, then you need to rewind and listen to some of these things that the prosecution had to lay out for the judge in order to keep this guy behind bars. So while this trial and investigation is heading to trial and these investigations are continued, he doesn't have the ability to get his little paws in the middle of things, threaten people, coerce. You know, he has to have some money stashed somewhere. Like, I totally don't think he's broke, and I don't think he's wealthy. Like, I don't believe he had it like he used to have it, for sure. However, the fact that he paid Valencia Love back for her $100,000 and 3 days later, and someone reminded me that that was a holiday weekend, and I guess he couldn't get to his money or whatever, so she gave it to him just so he could get out. And I guess he promised 10,000 in interest, which she showed a copy of the cashier's check. I have a video on my channel if you haven't seen it. It was on Twitter. She posted this because she was pissed at Wendy Williams for talking shit about her. So she went out and blasted the fact that R. Kelly paid me back my 100,000 and I made 10,000 in interest in 3 days. What? I'm a boss. You know what I mean? Not even looking at the fact that she had just sent her attorney to court to ask for her money back, quote unquote, her money. Technically, it's not her money. If he paid her back, it's his money. But she admitted on Twitter that she wanted to help him with his defense. She said Michael Jackson's lawyer cost $4 million. And I do think Greenberg knew what was happening, and he looked like weird during that whole thing. So just this, you know, that's just some shady shit. Like, and I understand, you know, people who are in a position, you get creative when you're thinking of how to get money for this or that. But to go into the court and have your attorney go in front of a judge and lie about the fact that you want your money back because you didn't know he was going to, you know, get arrested and again on other charges and da-da-da. But in reality, you already got your money back. And then some. So the fact that he was able to pay that back to her so quickly, there's money somewhere. It could have definitely been sponsored by someone else. But anyway, so I'm gonna finish this part of it so I can get to Greenberg's letter that he filed yesterday, because we want to know, what does he have to say that's going to change any of this stuff that was already filed. The prosecution has to come back with an answer. The court ordered an answer by tomorrow at noon. And you know, I'm curious to see if there's anything outside of what they've already laid out. They you know, are they going to add any new things? But this, because what they've already laid out back when he was first arrested in July, is some real deal, serious, heavy stuff. So to go on and finish this part of it up, the prosecution had also stated, in addition to physical harm, psychological harm is considered a danger under the Bail Reform Act. So now we're going to the psychological harm that he caused. It says, in cases like this, the harm is severe and real, and that's in quotes, severe and real, and the danger is ongoing, which is also in quotes, ongoing, which means it's important to note. And then it goes on to offer a couple of precedences or cases that are similar, where they're using them as examples, and they laid those out. And we're not going to go through that stuff, but it says, it goes on to say, in this case, okay, so these are similar cases that they're offering the judge to look at, because judges love precedents. If there's no precedence for something, you can almost forget it. And that's part of why the judge denied homegirl getting her bail back, is because he's like, when does this ever happen? I ain't never seen this happen before. Find me something of substance to back this up and come back. So the next part of this goes into the strength of the evidence. And this is the prosecution talking about the strength of their evidence that they have against Sylvester. The evidence against defendant is very strong and weighs in favor of detention. First, the government possesses 3 videos showing defendant sexually abusing a teen girl. These videos are disturbing, explicit, and crude. In 2 of the videos, defendant repeatedly refers to the victim's genitalia as being 14 years old, and in such a way that indicates his particular sexual attraction to girls that age. In 2 of the videos, defendant subjects the victim to sadomasochistic abuse. These videos alone evidence the need for defendant's detention, as he poses a risk to the community. Defendant's identity on these videos is established in multiple ways, including by the victim herself. All 3 of these videos were filmed at defendant's former home on George Street in Chicago, where very distinctive features of the home are prominently displayed on the videos. Second, the government has interviewed numerous victims who have testified under oath regarding defendant's sexual abuse and his methods of physical and psychological control. For example, one victim testified that defendant Kelly abused her beginning when she was just 13 or 14 years old. Defendant repeatedly coerced the victim to engage in various and numerous sex acts, including threesomes with other minors and defendant, and he routinely videotaped that activity. Defendant also physically abused the minor victim. Defendant maintained significant control over the victim and persuaded her for many years to withhold information from law enforcement regarding the sexual abuse. Similarly, another victim testified that defendant sexually abused her beginning when she was just 13 or 14 years old. She explained that the defendant coerced her to engage in threesomes and foursomes with him and other minor girls. Defendant convinced the victim to keep the sexual abuse secret, and he repeatedly sexually abused her for years. Defendant also routinely videotaped his sexual abuse of this victim. Another example, another victim recounted that she met defendant when she was 16 years old, and that he forced her to engage in a threesome with him and another minor, during which she cried because she didn't want to go through with it. Similarly, another victim testified that she cried when defendant coerced her into a threesome with defendant and another minor victim. Defendant videotaped his sexual abuse of this minor, including the threesomes. This victim also reported that defendant physically abused her and was psychologically controlling of her. It goes on to give another example of a 15-year-old, and the defense says the defendant lured the victim to come from a different state, and he sexually abused her on 2 different occasions, once occurring at his music studio in Chicago. Defendant's repeated sexual abuse of minors demonstrates that he's a danger to society. Also, the fact that defendant routinely created video evidence regarding the sexual abuse means that the victims live in constant fear that videotapes will surface and that they will be re-victimized by the receipt or distribution of those videotapes. This is a very real fear, particularly given the wide distribution and black market sales of Video 1 that occurred in connection with the defendant's state charges in 2002. Third, the government interviewed numerous witnesses who explained defendant's efforts to cover up and conceal his sexual abuse of young teen girls, including defendant's incredible efforts to obstruct justice. Incredible efforts. For example, one of the victim's parents testified that defendant threatened the family if he did not deny to law enforcement that the defendant sexually abused the victim. Okay, now we're talking about the parents who initially lied, and now they have since testified that the defendant threatened the family. Another witness explained that defendant hired him to collect and return copies of videotapes that showed defendant sexually abusing a minor. Defendant threatened the life of witness if the witness did not return all copies of the tape. A victim testified that she was depicted on one of those videotapes, and the defendant paid her $100,000 to return a copy of the videotape. Additionally, several witnesses explained that defendant required that at least 3 witnesses take a polygraph examination to ensure defendant collected all copies of videotapes that depicted him sexually exploiting minors. It says that the above detailed evidence is just a summary of the government's evidence of defendant's serial sexual abuse of minors and efforts to obstruct justice. Defendant has shown a repeated, violent, and dangerous history of exploiting minors, and he has demonstrated that he will break the law to try to keep himself from facing federal charges. Defendant should be detained pending trial. Exactly, Kendra. I'm going to read what Kendra said. That nigga knew what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing. Okay, so then it goes on. I'm almost done with this part of it. Defendant poses a serious risk of flight. And this is another thing that Greenberg brings up, which I'll get to that. Unlike the state court charges that defendant has faced since earlier this year, the indictment in this case charges defendant with numerous counts that carry a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years imprisonment. If convicted, defendant could spend the rest of his life in jail. The rest of his life. Defendant is an incredibly successful recording artist who earned multi-millions of dollars over several decades. He continues to live a lavish lifestyle. I mean, mind you, he was living at Trump Tower when they arrested him. That's not too shabby. And he has the means and incentive to flee now that he is facing much more serious charges with hard video evidence and cooperating victims. Accordingly, see, I'm going to repeat that. He continues to live a lavish lifestyle and has the means and incentive to flee now that he's facing much more serious charges and hardcore video evidence and cooperating victims. And that was what was lacking in the previous trial. There were witnesses, and I think Lisa Van Allen, I think there were a couple of victims, but that judge, there were a lot of things, the jury, there were a lot of things in play that led to his being acquitted. But we're not playing those games this time. It says, accordingly, defendant is a risk of flight in addition to being a danger to the community. The government will supplement this portion of its analysis after we review the pretrial services report. Okay, so then lastly, I think this might be lastly. Let's see. Yeah, I think this is the last. Defendant poses a serious risk of engaging in an obstruction of justice. So this is now they're addressing the obstruction of justice fear. In addition to being a danger to the community and a risk of flight, there is a serious risk that the defendant will obstruct or attempt to obstruct justice or threaten, injure, or intimidate a prospective witness. See, so it says count one of the indictment charges defendant with using a minor to create video one. The defendant was previously charged with this conduct in the People of Illinois versus Robert Kelly, and it names the case number for the previous case back in 06 or 02, technically, when he was arrested. But that defendant actively obstructed justice during the pendency of this trial. Defendant threatened witnesses. He isolated the victim at the issue of the case. He paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to at least 3 separate people to collect and round up video evidence that would prove his guilt. The defendant undermined the integrity of the state court trial, and his efforts obstructed the fair administration of justice. It further discouraged victims from cooperating with law enforcement for years, which allowed defendant to get away with his conduct for so long. Not anymore. It says that, not anymore. Additionally, as described in count 4 of the indictment, there is a probable cause to believe that defendant persuaded and instructed numerous witnesses and victims to lie under oath. Defendant used threats of violence, financial intimidation, and other coercive methods to ensure that victims and witnesses would not disclose the fact that he sexually abused a minor. Further, defendant and defendant's co-conspirators covered up evidence proving that minor 1 was depicted in video 1. So there it is. This is what they're basically laying out is what happened in the previous trial and how he coerced and threatened and bought his way out of a conviction. Defendant and his co-conspirators also made witnesses and victims falsify records and create false entries in records. For example, defendant and his co-conspirators arranged for one victim to meet with an attorney who created a report of the interview with false information. At defendant and his co-conspirators' direction and through intimidation and threats, the victim falsely denied that defendant engaged with a threesome with the victim and another minor. Okay, wow. So they didn't miss a beat with this motion, and it worked because he's in jail. This is the motion they filed July 12th, the day after his federal indictments came down on him. And because of this motion, he's in jail. And so Greenberg yesterday filed a motion to undo this motion and allow his client Sylvester to be released on bail. The last paragraph here, I just want to wrap this one up properly. It says defendant engaged in these efforts in order to mitigate the risk that he would face the serious charges that he now faces in this court. Defendant's efforts amount to probable cause and that he conspired to obstruct justice over the course of many years. And there is probable cause to believe that the defendant is at serious risk of continuing to obstruct or attempting to obstruct justice. And in conclusion, the government respectfully requests that the defendant be detained pending trial. So there it is. That was the original motion for why he's currently being detained. I think it was pretty clear how serious the charges are, and as well as the fact that he is still a threat, and should he be released, he will continue to be a threat. Now I'm going to switch this paperwork out. This is what I just read here. I need to see this up close and personal. Let's see what you guys are talking about here for a second. And you on the replay, I'm sorry if you don't like the fact that I'm chatting with my people, but you need to catch the live if you want to be a part of the party. Otherwise, you can simply fast forward or skip through the talking. Let's see. Yeah, it kills me how this mother thinks he was above the law. Yeah, Jay Coop, I agree with you too. I wouldn't dare betray my child. That is exactly what happened in a lot of this, especially in the Landfair case, where she was the original victim in the first tape, the 14-year-old. And her parents definitely, and even her brother, and got some. He's Chance the Rapper's drummer. He's been in the business. SZA, I mean, he's doing a lot also for his career. Like, all of them have benefited, it seems, from this girl having been the victim of all this abuse. Ventus Kids. All right. So now we have Greenberg's motion, and Greenberg filed this yesterday. And let's see, I'm not going to read every word of it, but I just want to kind of get to why he feels that R. Kelly should be released. It was a kind of a viral moment yesterday when it was published, and it came from this letter that his health is failing, or he's having health issues, as well as the fact that he can only see one girlfriend at a time every 90 days. But let's see what he says formally here in this letter. So he addresses the court, the judge, and he says that my firm, along with others, represents Robert Kelly in this matter. And they go on to basically say that the previous magistrate denied pretrial release as a risk of flight, and because he believed there was possibility of obstruction. And acknowledging that, he's respectfully asking the court to review that previous magistrate's decision, because he's saying the government failed to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Kelly poses a serious risk. They failed to prove it, he's saying, although he's in jail right now because of the initial motion to keep him in jail during pending trial. But of course, Greenberg says the government failed to prove that he poses a risk of flight or that he's a danger to commit obstruction. The magistrate erred in concluding otherwise. So he's saying that the magistrate was wrong, and based upon the applicable facts and the governing legal standard is why he's saying this. And that's bullshit. It says Mr. Kelly is presumed innocent. His case is defensible, and he does not have any criminal record. So by saying that, Greenberg is basically disregarding everything that has come forth and come to light with civil suits, with, there's been so many things in the past. He's disregarding all of that to say that he doesn't have a criminal record. And all that says is that this person hasn't been legally caught. The government's argument that given the defendant's lengthy and wide-ranging history of obstruction, there are no conditions that can overcome this presumption, he's saying, is predicated upon a presumption of guilt, and it requires an absolute acceptance of every factual inference without any consideration of time period, prior testimony, lack of cooperation, or the adversary process. Okay. It goes on to say the government's argument for detention was also rooted in its claim Mr. Kelly has a lengthy and wide-ranging history of criminal conduct. This is unquestionably false and misleading, given that Mr. Kelly has never been convicted of any crime. He's being very to the letter. Obviously he's never been convicted. He was acquitted based on crimes, he's now being charged with. So of course he doesn't have a record, but how do you sit there and just say that he's not someone to be feared, that he doesn't have a past history of things when we know that this stuff happened, okay? But he's being a lawyer, and he's sticking to the quote-unquote facts. Yes, he has a criminal history for sure, Nia Marie. So he's saying also that the magistrate completely failed to consider this circumstance when Mr. Kelly was denied bail. And equally important, he gave no meaningful discussion to reasonable conditions. So basically, Greenberg is saying he didn't give a meaningful discussion about why he didn't give him bond, and what were the reasonable, can we talk about reasonable conditions instead? So they want to have a house arrest or something like that. Let's see. So he goes on to say that I'm sorry, I'm reading just some of this real quick. Okay, so he's going on to argue that in reality, the act that they referred to in the July 12th detention letter request, they're saying that it mandates a simple two-step inquiry, and a defendant may be detained pending trial only if both prongs are satisfied. And they're saying, I guess, that they didn't satisfy both prongs of that act. It says, first, the government must demonstrate the defendant has been charged with one of the crimes enumerated in Section 3142, or that he presents a serious risk of flight or obstruction. Thus, no matter how dangerous an individual may be, he cannot be detained unless one of these initial conditions is satisfied. I think, being that the judge took that information, and both of the judges, and said, okay, no bond, I think that proves that their points. I don't understand how he can just say that they didn't prove this and they didn't satisfy that. It says here the government contended that there was a presumption of both a serious risk of flight and a danger to the community. That is wrong. Mr. Kelly does not present a serious risk of flight, of either flight or obstruction. Okay. Second, even where the government satisfies its burden as to the first prong, detention may be ordered only if no condition or combination of conditions can reasonably assure the defendant's presence. Okay, so this is where they come in and they say he went to every court hearing in his previous trial. He, even since then up to now, has never missed a court date. He's on time. He never flew, the coop before when he was on bond for 6 years waiting trial. They're using the fact that he did not, that he adhered to all of the conditions when he was out on bond the first time. But he's saying this without even acknowledging the first time as being a real thing. Like, that's something that's being considered, his history, his patterns. And he's going to refer to that trial to say how good he is without acknowledging the fact that he was on trial in the first place and why he was on trial. And this is why I have a problem with this defense, because they really are not, honestly, obviously, I'm not a fan of R. Kelly. I'm glad that his defense are clowns. It just bothers me, though, because I'm somebody who prides myself on integrity and, just doing my best. Like, when I do a job, I put 100%, especially if someone's life is on the line, And I just feel like these people are clowning, and they're just taking advantage, I guess, of the quote-unquote cash cow in the situation. You have to admit that these attorneys have come up in the sense of notoriety when they've taken this case, especially Greenberg. And for what I understand, they aren't getting paid, which is why that whole dollar for whatever is confusing to me, because to me, I feel like he's in debt to his attorneys at this point. He has to be. And any money they're collecting, I'm sure they're not going to start fresh. Like, okay, we're going to start fresh and let you pay this money to this new attorney that got Michael Jackson off. But I just don't see how that is. Are they accounting for every dollar and dime that's coming in? Who's keeping the records? Like, I don't know. None of that really makes sense to me. But let's see. So where was I? I'm going to get to the goods on this. So he basically goes into, let's see how many numbers here. Looks like 11 points of why R. Kelly should get bond. And I'm just going to really probably just go through the headings and see if I can just find like some pertinent point, because I definitely can't read through this. But number one is Mr. Kelly is well outside the class of individuals for whom pretrial detention is warranted. He's outside the class of individuals, for whom pretrial detention is warranted. All right. For me, I don't know. That just sounds really pretentious. But okay, let's see what he says. It says Mr. Kelly's continued detention is not justified on the facts. It marks a substantial departure from the class of cases in which pretrial detention has been deemed necessary. To gather a sense of the type of particularly dangerous individuals whom Congress had in mind under the Act, one need to look forward at no further than the second line of Second Circuit cases on pretrial detention. In contrast, those with the facts here. So he goes on to say these cases confirm that Mr. Kelly is clearly not the type of person for whom pretrial detention was or is warranted. It says Mr. Kelly is in his 50s. He does not have any criminal history. He's never missed a court date. He could not hide or evade surveillance given his fame. Now he has no passport. He has posted a substantial bond in state court and has voluntarily turned himself in on all charges and made no attempt to flee in the face of imminent federal charges and is presumed innocent. He's clearly not within the limited group of offenders who should be denied bail pending trial. Okay. Did you say he no longer smells like crap? Ventus Kits. You got jokes today. You came in hot today. Okay. So, he goes on, and his second point is that the government cannot satisfy the first requirement for pretrial detention. And to me, this is a slap in the face of the judge. Like, you're telling basically the judge he didn't do his job and that, you're here to set him straight. It says Mr. Kelly presents no flight risk. And the reason is because there's zero evidence from which this court can infer that Mr. Kelly is a risk of flight, let alone the required serious risk. And if you listen to what I read from the prosecution on July 12th, the order they filed, that stuff in that order, that motion is heavy, just disgusting. I mean, my stomach was churning as I was reading those charges and those acts of behavior against minor girls. So he's saying that that's not serious stuff. This is not serious enough. And this is not enough to keep him. And it says, to the contrary, Mr. Kelly's history directly undermines the government's unsupported assertions of flight risk. Perhaps most significant is Mr. Kelly's record of appearance. He faced prior criminal charges in Illinois State Court in early 2000s, for which he was released pending trial and never missed a single court appearance. He was acquitted by a jury on all charges after weeks of trial. He was acquitted. No other than because the jury just decided, not because of any coercion, not because of any manipulations, sending people on trips and threatening violence, none of that. No, he just got acquitted. And says Mr. Kelly appeared dozens of times in that matter, and he was never late. Additionally, he was allowed to travel, and he always returned. Yeah, because so R. Kelly was indicted in 2002. He was facing 15 years, from what I understand, at that time for the child porn tape. And he didn't get to trial till 2008. So between 2002 and 2008, he was still touring. He was still living his life, living his best life, matter of fact. And Greenberg, his point is that he could have, flew the coop. But why would he when he knows he's going to get away with it? Because he's paying everybody off, and he's the man of the town. He's rich at this time. He still had money coming in because he's touring and making money, and he felt like he could he could get away with anything. So why would he fly now? But now is a different time. Now is a different situation, and he wants to go back to the 2000s. No. So it says here, the fact that he was being investigated by the federal government was well known. Certainly he knew. In the face of that, Mr. Kelly went about his normal activities. There were never any concern that Mr. Kelly was going to flee, notwithstanding the swirl of rumors of investigation and looming indictment. When the agents arrested him, he was walking his dog. He was fully cooperative and never attempted to flee. So they're talking about the most recent arrest where he was walking his dog in front of Trump Tower where he was residing with his girlfriends. And saying that, he knew it was looming, even though if you would have asked Greenberg before the arrest, he didn't know anything about it. Let him tell it. He kept, when people would ask him, I haven't heard anything about that. I don't know anything about that. Now he's saying they knew, and he still hung around and lived his life. And probably because people like Greenberg are gassing him and telling him lies about how they're going to get him off and it's not a big deal, and downplaying the whole thing. So it goes on to say, equally, or perhaps more importantly, when he was indicted for very serious charges in Cook County in the spring of 2019, he voluntarily surrendered the same day. When charges were added to that action, he was told that he had to appear in court for an arraignment on those additional charges. He promptly and voluntarily did so. Notably, the Illinois prosecutors did not even ask to increase or change any condition of his bond at that time. Last, instead of using the last of his money to flee, Kelly posted a $100,000 bond in the case. Actually, he didn't post it, somebody else posted it, but yeah, it was posted, and apparently he paid it back. Absolutely, Ventus. Kits, I agree. Too many victims, and they're all working together with the prosecution, the federal prosecution at that. So, let's see what else here is worthy of reading. So it goes on to just say that he's saying that it was misreported that Kelly travels internationally. He does not. It says his last international travel was approximately 8 years ago. Plus, his passport has been surrendered. He cannot. So, do you really think someone facing life in jail, someone like R. Kelly, who is probably shocked that he's even in this position, and he's probably still got a cloud of delusion about him that he's going to walk out tomorrow, because I don't feel that the judge is going to give him the bond, or the judges. I don't believe so. But, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge. I'm not, any type of professional in the field. This is just my intuitive opinion. But it goes on. So he's saying that it was misreported that he doesn't travel internationally. So therefore, he's not going to go anywhere. He's not going to go anywhere. He hasn't been internationally abound in 8 years. So that's the reason he's giving for letting him out. I can laugh at this, honestly. I really want to. Ha! Ha ha! I have to laugh at this. This is so stupid to me. I can't believe these people are professional attorneys. Did you read? So the the motion that I read from the prosecution was so strong to me, and so Nia, yeah, I can't. And so thorough and so heavy and so full of disgust. The crimes that I'm sure these judges and these people, they probably have children that they're thinking about. Like, these are human beings too, the judges, believe it or not. I hope not, Deshaun. That's the hope. So it says that none of the typical indicia of flight risk exists in this case, he's saying. And that, what else is he saying? Where, the defendant, he's been a fugitive, or that, he's just saying that the people, I think they're going back to say the people that the prosecution used as precedences aren't nearly on the level, like R. Kelly's not on that level. He's not as dangerous as those people. He's famous. He can't go anywhere without being noticed. It says also, finally, there are various levels of monitoring, even home detention, that will ameliorate any conceivable risk. So he's saying, if you feel still strongly that he's a risk, there's also other ways to monitor him. He can get home detention. Which, why would you give him home detention when his crimes were committed in his home? It said that in the prosecution's motion to detain him, that the videotapes were his homes, or one of his homes specifically. It goes on to detail Mr. Kelly's personal history and characteristics. And this is more of Greenberg explaining why Sylvester should get out on bail. He says, by way of further background, Mr. Kelly is a lifelong resident of Chicago. Prior to his detention, he resided in a one-bedroom plus a modest den condominium with two lady friends. So he's playing down Trump Tower. Oh, he resided in a little old one-bedroom, very modest den in a little condo with his two lady friends. The building in which he resided is the Trump International Tower, a highly secure building with a 24-hour doorman and vast security, which is why they could barely get him to be served for things because of that high security. Nobody could get to him from the outside either. They had to wait for him to walk his dog. So no, that's not a good reason, Greenberg. It also says Mr. Kelly has a number of health issues which needs to be addressed and for which he is not presently receiving adequate medical care. This includes numbness of his hand. And there were a lot of comments saying that numbness in the hand is from him jerking off because he ain't getting no sex, or he might be getting it. We don't know. It says anxiety and an untreated hernia. His conditions of confinement, even after he was moved out of special housing unit, remain stifling. It says he's limited to 300 minutes on the telephone per month. His visits are severely restricted. Presently, he's only allowed to one unrelated person to visit. In other words, although he lives and has lived with two lady friends, only one of them is allowed to be on his visiting list. And after 90 days, he's required to switch. No other friends or professional colleagues are allowed to visit. That is not right, he says. Okay, well, I personally don't know the prison system well enough to say whether or not that's the norm. But it does sound a little weird. Like, you have to switch off your one friend. You can't, if they're not related to you, I don't know. But is that a reason to really ask the judge for him to be let out on bond because he can only see one of his girlfriends at a time? I don't think so. The next point he makes is that Mr. Kelly presents no genuine risk of obstruction. It says, despite the government's burden of demonstrating that Mr. Kelly poses a serious risk of danger to the community, the government relied upon just one alleged instance of obstruction in its July 12, 2019 letter. I think there were more than just one instance of obstruction, but and they're talking about the 2002 indictment and the original victim from that child porn tape. He's saying, oh, they used just one instance. Isn't one too many? Isn't that the reason he's in jail now? I mean, this is crazy to me. Okay, anyway, let me go on. It says that the government relied exclusively on a letter. Oh, okay, I see. Now they're talking about a different thing. Okay, so it says the government relied exclusively on a letter that is related to a civil case. If there is a letter, Mr. Kelly did not write it. He can only write phonetically. Although he does not deny someone may have asked him to sign something, he does deny he ever intended to threaten anyone. I have that letter, by the way, and that letter was to Faith Rogers, and it threatened her to leave his name out her mouth, for her to stay away from the courts, for her to not continue beating her drum about his abuse. And it was a pretty threatening letter. And the prosecution used that letter also to say that he's out here threatening people and being a bully out here, just being R. Kelly, okay? We can start using R. Kelly as a verb. You can R. Kelly somebody if you threaten them, if you, rape them, if you are being a predator on minor children for sexual abuse. That's called R. Kellying. Yes, we're verbing him. He's officially a verb. All right. So let's see. So they're saying that what else is it saying here? Okay, so he talks about that letter. He's saying, there was only one thing. I mean, that's nothing. Like, it says, Mr. Kelly has never knowingly expressed any anger towards the individual in those materials. Moreover, Mr. Kelly has never engaged in any threatening or violent conduct towards her. And this is the girl who is accusing him of giving her a STD. There's a civil case also with regard to this. And she's the one that as soon as the Surviving R. Kelly came out, he tried to do a Surviving Lies and put all her business on Facebook and on the social media, trying to call her a hoe and all kinds of stuff. And I have to do this one more time. I'm sorry. Is this for real? I'm sorry, guys. I can't. This is not a funny matter, but I just can't understand. I can't. Okay. So let's see. It says one of the Jane Does named in the indictment, number 5, filed a civil suit against Mr. Kelly last year. Her original attorney was convicted of fraud, and it appears at this point that Jane Doe is unrepresented. Okay. It is believed that this is the individual who the government claims Mr. Kelly threatened. More to the point, because, yeah, her attorney was also indicted, just like Avenatti was indicted. Her attorney was indicted right before they were going to a hearing. And I do believe R. Kelly behind the scenes is doing things to make these things happen. People on Twitter call it the R. Kelly curse. Of course, they're his fans, but they call it the R. Kelly curse because apparently Oprah got sick recently on a trip. And they're saying, oh, that was the R. Kelly curse. And then one of the founders of the Time's Up movement, I think she's also battling some type of health issue, and she talks about it on Twitter. They're calling that the R. Kelly curse. So nobody's buying that, okay? Nobody's buying that R. Kelly's behind the scenes cursing people. However, I do believe that he was going behind the scenes and doing the other stuff they're accusing him of doing. So let's see. Let me go on here. Says that it is believed. So, yeah, so he said he may have signed something. Okay, so I'm just trying to see what I don't have to read because we're almost to the end of this. I don't see anything in Greenberg's motion so far that says to me that, and you know, maybe I'm biased in my opinion because of how I feel, but I'm trying to be neutral in reading these documents, even though I had to laugh at some of this stuff. But, you know, I don't see anything that screams to me that he should be let out. Let's see what else he says, if there's anything interesting. He's calling, you know, their logic nonsensical, that it has no basis with regard to the video evidence, in regards to him supposedly threatening people. It says, likewise, the government claimed that Mr. Kelly threatened physical harm. However, again, there is no evidence of this, nor is there evidence that anyone was ever physically harmed, or even any details providing the basis for such alleged threats. They detailed the stuff in the initial motion. I don't understand this. This really makes me mad, honestly. What else is he saying? The government also claimed that Mr. Kelly continued to commit crimes while he was released on bail in his 2002 Illinois case, referencing allegations of kidnapping and sexual assault. As support for those allegations, the government references Jane Doe number 2 in the indictment, who appears to be an adult. Notably, this individual never complained about her interactions with Mr. Kelly until quite recently, 2 decades after the conduct allegedly occurred. Oh, so that makes it okay. She was a child. She was a child back then, and now she's an adult, and she's come into her own, and she's like, I'm doing this. But you want to say that because she never complained about it before, that it's not a problem? And that it was 2 decades after that she's coming forth? This just explains people don't understand the psychology behind abuse, especially with children. Given the secretive nature of the government's disclosures to date, the defense counsel cannot further respond because they do not know the identity of this individual. But yet you just said that this person appears to now be an adult and that they were involved in the 2002 case. So you do know who this person is. I'm not even a judge and I'm battling this fool, okay? Given the, let's see, so it says, but again, Mr. Kelly is presumed innocent of the charges in the indictment because he was acquitted, and such conduct cannot form the basis of his detention. It does say, in interest of full disclosure, the Illinois federal court indictment alleges that Mr. Kelly engaged in certain activities while he was previously out on bail in the Illinois state court in the 2000s. And now they're going to bring up Geronda Pace. Geronda Pace is a stick in everyone's ass on the other side. I call them the other side. That's what they call us, the other side. So they're saying, okay, we're going to, full disclosure here, we do have something that, he probably shouldn't have done. Okay, so it says, an individual made a complaint against Mr. Kelly known during the pendency of that case. The complaint was at that time fully investigated by the Chicago police. So that means she made a police report, right? And Cook County prosecutors. Ultimately, no charges were ever brought against Mr. Kelly in response to those allegations. Those allegations, now being remade some 15 years later, do not appear to have any new or additional basis. They may not have any new or additional basis, but we can look back at the time that the Chicago police and Cook County prosecutors did not bring any charges because he had people in his pockets. At that, nobody charged him for anything back then. People filed police reports. They were ignored. Like, people want to say, oh, there were no police reports. There were police reports, and there were attorneys that would be contacted or find out about those police reports, and they would contact the girls and pay them off. He had a woman attorney who would pay off to the tune of $250,000 these girls who went to the police or threatened to go to the police. Okay. Moving on. It says, significantly, Mr. Kelly's co-defendants in the Illinois federal case who have also similarly been charged with the very same alleged obstruction activities as Mr. Kelly have been released from custody. One is in Las Vegas. So they're basically like, look, what about his co-defendants? They're out. Why them and not him? Wow. Really? Okay. And they're probably out because they don't have the patterns that he has. Clearly the things, at least that one dude, Milton, he was doing these things for his dude, for his boy or his boyfriend, whatever you want to call him. But he wasn't the one over decades who's famous and rich and, able to move through the city like a god. He might have done that by association, but of course, they're going to let them out. They might even be cooperating. As far as we know, we don't know. That's his boyfriend, Kendra. R. Kelly is the principal. Yes. So it says, in any event, to the extent the court believes that a significant risk of obstruction exists, that risk can be adequately alleviated, as discussed below, through conditions of release. So they're saying, you know what? You can release him, but put some conditions on him. If you're feeling a little, uneasy about this, or if you're feeling not too sure, there's conditions we can put on him, such as prohibition on contacting co-defendants and potential witnesses, as well as tight restrictions on his travel. So really, he's going to say here that, if you really do feel he's going to do those things, all you got to do is just, give him a rule not to do it. Just tell him not to do it. It goes on to say the government cannot satisfy the second requirement for the pretrial detention under the Bail Reform Act. So here's where they counter the fact that both requirements were met for this act. They're saying only one requirement. Oh, no, get down. Sorry. Okay, so let's see what exactly he says about this. Okay. Pre-trial detention is permitted only if the court finds that no condition or combination of conditions of release would reasonably assure that their appearance and the safety of the community. It says this is plainly not such a case. Ample conditions exist that would assure his appearance and court and would mitigate whatever risks exist to the community. In evaluating whether conditions exist to reasonably assure a defendant's presence and safety of the community, the act requires the court to consider the nature of the circumstances and the offense charged, including whether the offense is a crime of violence, the weight of the evidence, and the history of the characteristics of the person. And he's saying that these factors weigh in favor of Mr. Kelly's release. Despite what the prosecution has laid out as far as all of these reasons why he should be detained and why he is detained and should stay detained, Greenberg and his team say, actually, that act is in favor of Mr. Kelly's release. And this is why he's saying, and I'm almost done here. He's saying first that since the July 12, 2019 detention hearing, no evidence has been disclosed to the defense showing that substantial evidence supports the indictment. So he's saying that all of that discovery that they got, they've gone through all of it, and so far they haven't seen anything that supports the actual indictment itself. He's saying that that indictment, it shouldn't even stand. Defendant can only guess that the indictment is merely a holding charge for a pending superseding indictment charging an actual RICO conspiracy involving more than one person, and thus that the current indictment was issued for the sole purpose of attempting to arrest Mr. Kelly prior to federal prosecutors in Chicago. So he's saying that basically they're trying to just hold him until they can get what they need to do to give him an actual RICO charge. And also that the Chicago state charges only happened because they were trying to beat the feds with the arrest. So it says, second, with respect to the history and characteristics of Mr. Kelly, he has strong family ties in the community. He has lived in the community for over 50 years, and he has a perfect, unblemished record concerning appearance at court proceedings. Moreover, at the time of the current offense or arrest, he was not on probation. Oh my God. Okay, so the fact that he even has had all of these appearances at court where he had to be there in the first place, he is not considering that that's also a factor. That's a factor. His history is a factor, okay? It says, third, as to the nature and seriousness of the danger purportedly posed by his release, the Pretrial Services Department is perfectly capable of monitoring Mr. Kelly and preventing him from contacting alleged victims. So now it's going to be up to pretrial services to keep him in check. We can rely on them to do it because really we can't trust him to do it or not do it. So we can rely on Pretrial Services Department though. Moreover, the government likely has its witnesses tightly under wraps. So they're saying, and the government has their people under wraps. So how could he get to them? And it says being monitored closely by the FBI agents and by victim specialists. Should Mr. Kelly even attempt to contact one of them, assuredly they would immediately tell the FBI or the coordinator, causing the court to revoke his pretrial release. So he's saying, should Sylvester even try to contact one of them? Of course they're going to tell the FBI and they're going to tell the coordinator. Like he's just going to find out where they are or go knocking on somebody's door. Like he's not going to send somebody or do something backhanded, shady. Come on. Fourth, pretrial services in the Northern District of Illinois recommended release with conditions. So he's saying that pretrial services in the Chicago and the Illinois case has recommended release with conditions. So really it's the New York judge that he has to convince is what he's saying. So while pretrial in the Eastern District of New York did not recommend release, there does not appear to be any reason, and they didn't explain one, and they don't appear to have one. So he's saying they don't even have a reason why they didn't recommend release for him in New York. But Illinois did, so New York is the problem. Okay, this is what he's saying. And this is the court that's tomorrow, I think, is New York. So, and then finally it says because of the fundamental importance of Mr. Kelly's interest in liberty, that, This court also should consider the anticipated length of his pretrial detention. So they're saying, you know, you got to keep in mind the length of time that this is going to keep him in jail. It says this too weighs strongly in favor of Mr. Kelly's release pending trial. Mr. Kelly has already been detained for approximately 3 months, and a trial, which is likely to last more than 1 month, is unlikely to begin any sooner than sometime early to mid 2020. Thus, if the court continues to deny his pretrial release, Mr. Kelly undoubtedly will suffer a prolonged period of detention before a determination is ever made about his innocence or guilt. So he's saying, you know, he's going to be in jail a long time if you don't let him out before trial. Trial is not going to happen until 2020, early or mid 2020. As we know that there was a tentative date for April, I believe, 27th, 2020. And then there's a conclusion here, and it just says fully consistent with the intent of the Bail Reform Act, as well as constitutional limitations of the deprivation of an individual's liberty. Pretrial detention is reserved only for those defendants who are particularly dangerous and who pose a serious cognizable risk of flight and or danger to the community. But Mr. Kelly does not fall in this narrow category of people. It's a narrow category of people, they're saying. And Mr. Kelly does not fall there because conditions of release exist in this case that would realistically eliminate any purported risk of flight or danger to the community. The court should release Mr. Kelly subject to whatever conditions it deems appropriate. So they laid out a bunch of options. You can do monitoring, electronic monitoring. Sylvester, sit down. Yes, sit down. So I personally, like I said, I'm not wowed by that motion. I'm not reading anything that says that he should be released. To bring up his health issues seems only to point out the privilege that he assumes because of his celebrity. There are medical facilities in jails and prisons and professionals in the jail systems, and every other prisoner or detainee must utilize those resources provided. Am I wrong? And to bring up the girlfriends, that's just very bizarre to me. What significance does the fact that he has limited visits with them possibly hold? I mean, that's just unreal. But I just wanted to bring these things to light, and we'll see how it plays out in court. But those are the dynamics so far that we have about Bond, why he's there, and the reasons his defense gives to for him to be released. And Angela, I gave you a headache. That was not my intention to give a headache, but I do understand because I think I also have a headache. But it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff and too much in order to just flatly say that does not apply to him because he's this and he's that. And all I hear when I hear he's this and he's that is that he's rich, he's famous, he's this, he's R. Kelly. How can you do this to R. Kelly? You know? So, and you heard one of the P-hivers and her YouTube channel spewing her disgust about 16-year-olds and them, how she doesn't believe in statutory rape, and they put themselves in a position of danger, so they need to deal with it. And by her saying that, she basically says that being with R. Kelly is being in a position of danger. She don't even realize that what she said. So, oh, Deshaun, you in there getting people together. I see. That's good. Yeah, he's just a man, Jody. Exactly. Exactly. So, you guys, anything else you want to bring up or whatever before I'm out? Whiny Dee baby. He can't get what he wants. You know, he's used to getting what he wants. Some other things I saw in the comments were that he's horny because he hasn't been able to have his sex with his girls. Oh, man, you want to bring up Fraud Rice right now. I don't want to talk about Fraud Rice, but what about him? Yeah, she does contradict herself all the time. First, she's like, you don't care about black men. You don't care about black. Then it's, Well, you only care about black girls, so you don't really care about women because you wouldn't just say black girl. You know, she's just all over the place, and she's just really a big fan is all it is. You all hate her. Are we all haters? Is that what it is, Gregory? But you coming over here to tell us that? But we over here, we chilling. I think you're the one that's mad because your fave is behind bars, and he right now doesn't have bail. He got health problems. He can't see his girls. You know what I'm saying? He has family members coming out the woodwork talking about him while he's in jail. He has no control over his life outside of those bars. All kinds of stuff happening with his fans, this, that. I mean, it's just so much stuff. His hand is wore out, right, Nia Marie? his is it called fapping hand? His jerk-off hand? Okay, Gregory, fantastic. You can go lick his balls if he gets out. How about that? Yeah, so tomorrow's court will be interesting. So I think it's a federal court, so we won't get it live, but I'm sure we're going to get reports on Twitter because usually there's at least 1 or 2 reporters giving a play-by-play on Twitter. If you just search... somebody get Gregory out of here before I go off on him. And you guys do not want to hear the goddess go down to meet the haters, get on their level. Because I can go there really, really quick. You guys keeping him here so you can just go back and forth with him. Thank you for timing him out, Nia Marie. He needs to be gone. He's going to end up in the comments after this thing publishes. Okay, Deshaun, thank you. He's singing. Shut up, shut up. I'm talking to you. Yeah, so I don't know. He just seems like he's cooked to me. In my opinion, I even did cards, you guys. Let me see if the cards are still in order as how I put them last night. Because the ones that I pulled basically said he's sick. He's a fallen star. Yep. We got the fallen star. This card came up, the devil. This card came up, the hangman. These cards came up for him last night. And there was the one, oh yeah, the fool card came up for him too. Sure did. And the hermit frog. So the hermit card came up. Let me just tell you what happened last night. I did a reading because I wanted to know about his health issues. Were they real and serious? And we get this card. So this card is ill health. This card came up. And the hermit card came up because of his current state, being locked up. This card represents that and the fact that he's all by his lonesome for the most part. And then the fool came up, and that speaks for itself. You're dealing with a fool, and you're also dealing with a hanged man. This is also representing him. He's a hanged man. And then the devil card came up. The devil card is never a good card. Okay. And this card came up reversed, and this card comes to mean that he basically wants to die. Like, he's in a position now of, like, if I don't get out of here, I don't even want to live. And then we had the star card, which was reversed, and that just means it's a fallen star. It means you had everything going for you and, you know, everything in the world. But yet now it's upside down because he's down. He's a fallen star. So those are the cards that came up for him last night. And that just confirmed for me that I didn't see any light in any of the reading. I didn't see anything that said, you know, well, there's hope. None of that. So... and I'm an intuitive. I do this for a living. I help people. I heal. I do quantum healing. I do chakra alignment and energy cleansing and all these things for people. And, you know, people like him, he needs the work. He needs somebody like me, but he would never have me. He deserves everything that's happening to him right now in this moment. And you know, what do you want to say? We just watching the show right now. This is the show he gave us. So he's the entertainer. Yeah, that's what the card say. He's suicidal, and in the mind, it's something he debates. He's got a very dark inner life right now. Had a great time too, Alice. You're welcome. Thanks for hanging out. If you're past your teens, you're too old for him. The cards don't lie, Deshaun. Not with me, they don't. Not with me. Them girls need to go home. Nobody won't hire them. Yeah, I guess the whole plan, according to Tasha K, was that they were going to get hired. And TMZ, they've been saying it too. I'm locked up. What is the song? I'm locked up. They won't let me out. Yes. Oh, thank you. Between friends and family. I love that. Thank you so much. All right, y'all. I guess that's going to do it. Like the video. Yes. Thank you, Nia, for reminding me. P.I. will be in the comments. So, y'all, listen. I need you guys to come back tomorrow maybe, but just come back, and we got to get in the comments because they're going to be in the comments about it. I'm telling you. Can you do a reading on the girls? Yes, I have done readings on the girls. That's actually why I started my channel. My first reading was in January after the docuseries, and I did a reading on Azriel. I did a reading on Joycelyn. I did a reading on R. Kelly also, the three of them. I mean, I've done that. I can do a new one. I don't want to, let me see if, let's do one card. Let me see. I didn't shuffle the cards, but let me see. So who are we going to focus on real quick? Let's see. Azriel and Joycelyn. Azriel Clary, Joycelyn Savage, Robert Kelly. So the girls. The girls have been pretty quiet on the front that we know, which is the media. Haven't seen anything happening with them. So Azriel and Joycelyn. What's going on with them? Azriel and Joycelyn. Azriel. Okay. I got one card. Father of Pentacles. Okay. Okay. Uh-oh. And then this one. The Hermit. Okay, so that's R. Kelly. Father of Pentacles. That might be one of the dads, or both the dads. You got R. Kelly. And that's not a good card. That is that card typically means addiction, mental anguish. This card says confusion. This card says problems, and a lot of it, you know, has to do with drugs, alcohol, and mental illness. That's what this card represents. So to me, and I'm only going to pull those three. So it says to me they're in between the fathers and R. Kelly, and right now they're confused. They are probably drinking and popping pills or something to that effect. And they are, you know, like I said, confused and just not in a good place. And this is what the cards say tonight. Had me lying in my hospital. Okay, I'm missing stuff. But I'm going to go, y'all. I appreciate you. Remember to go in the comments. We got to, you know, keep up the good fight. And as always, I appreciate you. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video. And again, comments. I live for the comments. All right. Love y'all. Peace.